It was the spring of 1374, in the quiet, mist-covered town of Brackenshire, where every street smelled faintly of peat smoke and boiled cabbage. The market square was still damp from a morning rain, and a thin fog drifted between the timber-framed houses. Marjorie Holt walked quickly down the narrow lane, her skirts brushing against puddles. She carried a small basket lined with linen and covered with a sprig of rosemary, a faint scent to keep away bad humors, at least according to old Mother Brindle, who sold her the herb for a single farthing. Marjorie's cheeks were flushed, not from the chill, but from the errand she was on. Her intended destination was the home of Sir Reginald Follis, an eccentric nobleman with hair the color of chalk dust and a reputation for keeping odd company. Marjorie had been summoned not as a servant, but as a participant in one of his romantic experiments, as he called them. It was said that Sir Reginald had traveled across the seas, collecting tales of the most peculiar courtship rituals from every corner of Christendom and beyond. He was determined to revive them for the good of the people, which often meant convincing the townsfolk to join him in candle-lit chambers for demonstrations that teetered between the ridiculous and the unsettling. Marjorie had agreed, though not without some hesitation. She had been told it was harmless, though the definition of harmless in Brackenshire was flexible at best. The hall was dim when she entered, lit only by a single beeswax candle that burned steadily in the corner. Its flame cast a trembling shadow across the wall, revealing Sir Reginald's figure leaning forward eagerly. He wore a doublet heavy with gold trim and a necklace studded with large blue stones that caught the light and glimmered like drops of morning dew. "Ah, Marjorie," he exclaimed, his voice full of theatrical warmth. "You are just in time for the demonstration." Marjorie's gaze darted to the table beside him. Upon it lay several objects: a carved wooden comb, a strip of embroidered linen, and, most puzzling of all, a small glass vial containing a cloudy liquid. "What exactly are we demonstrating?" she asked, setting her basket on a chair. Sir Reginald stepped closer, lowering his voice as though he were about to share a great secret. "My dear, in the Middle Ages, which, as you know, we are living in, at this very moment, the bond between a man and a woman could be sealed in ways far stranger than the church bells would have you believe. Tonight, you and I shall explore one such practice. The candlelight confession." He explained with a gleam in his eye that in certain parts of the realm, lovers would gather in secret, standing before a single flame, and speak aloud the most peculiar things they had ever dreamed of, believed in, or feared. This, he said, was thought to bind their spirits together for life, or at the very least provide an evening's amusement. Marjorie tilted her head. "And you wish me to confess?" "Indeed," Sir Reginald replied, "and I shall confess in turn. But remember, the tradition requires that the candle remain the only light, and the flame must never be allowed to flicker out. Should it die, the bond is broken, and ill fortune follows." She wasn't sure whether to believe him, but she was intrigued. After all, it was better than mending socks by the fire. They stood before the candle. The room felt warmer than it had before, the air thick with the scent of melted wax. Sir Reginald went first. "When I was a boy," he began, "I once believed that if a maiden drank from the same cup as a man during the hour of vespers, they were fated to wed by the next harvest. I tested this theory on a girl named Agnes, but alas, she married the cooper's son instead. I have since concluded that the superstition is either flawed or the cooper had better wine." Marjorie laughed softly, though she kept her eyes on the flame. "Is that truly a confession?" "It is," he said, "for it reveals both my gullibility and my fondness for wine." Now it was her turn. She hesitated, When I was younger, she said slowly, I believed that tying a ribbon soaked in rosewater around my wrist would make any man who saw it fall in love with me. I wore one for weeks. No one noticed except a stray dog who tried to chew it off. Sir Reginald chuckled, his teeth catching the candlelight. We are alike, then, both victims of quaint nonsense. As the confessions continued, the atmosphere shifted. They spoke of stranger things, beliefs that a shoe placed under a pillow could summon dreams of a future spouse, that a piece of bread baked with rosemary could cure jealousy, that looking too long at a full moon could drive one to hopeless longing. Marjorie began to feel that the candle was not merely lighting the room, but holding it together, as though the flame created a small, private world in which the absurd was perfectly reasonable. Then came Sir Reginald's most unusual confession. There is one custom, he said in a hushed tone, that I have never dared try until tonight. It comes from the far eastern shores, or so the sailors claim. They say that to truly test a bond, two people must stare into each other's eyes, mouths open, in silent astonishment. For the space of 3 heartbeats, Marjorie's brow furrowed. That sounds peculiar. It is meant, he explained, to strip away all pretense, to leave nothing but raw truth between you. She was about to laugh, but something in his expression stopped her. He was entirely serious. They stood there, inches apart, the candle flickering between them. Marjorie opened her mouth slightly, as instructed, and widened her eyes. Sir Reginald mirrored her exactly. It was ridiculous, but in that moment she felt an odd current pass between them. Not romance exactly, but a shared understanding that life was full of foolish rituals, yet sometimes the foolishness itself could be the point. The 3 heartbeats passed. They stepped back, both smiling in a way that wasn't entirely from amusement. The moment was broken by a sudden draft. The candle flickered violently, and for a breath it seemed the flame might go out. Sir Reginald lunged toward it, cupping his hand around the light. No, 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 not yet, he murmured. When the flame steadied, he sighed with relief. That, he said, would have been unfortunate. Because of the ill fortune? Marjorie teased. Because, he replied more softly, it would have ended the evening too soon. They resumed their confessions, speaking now of more personal matters, fears of being forgotten, hopes of finding a place where they belonged, memories of times when kindness had come from unexpected places. The candle burned lower, the pool of melted wax spreading across the holder. Outside, the fog thickened, and the distant bell of the parish church tolled the hour. Inside, the air grew warmer still, heavy with the scent of rosemary from Marjorie's basket. At last, Sir Reginald looked toward the flame and said, Tradition holds that the final confession should be a wish for the other person's happiness. Marjorie nodded. She thought for a long moment before speaking. I wish, she said quietly, that you always find someone willing to stand in the candlelight with you, no matter how strange your rituals may be. Sir Reginald's face softened. And I wish that you always keep a ribbon, whether or not it brings you love, simply because it pleases you. When the candle finally burned down to a stub, they let it gutter out naturally. The room seemed darker than before, yet not unkind. Marjorie gathered her basket. Thank you for inviting me, she said. He inclined his head. Thank you for trusting me. As she stepped back into the misty night, she felt lighter than she had when she arrived. The confessions had been silly, even absurd, yet they had opened a small door inside her. Perhaps, she thought, the strangest practices of the Middle Ages were not the ones that bound people in superstition, but the ones that reminded them, in unexpected ways, how to truly see each other. Sir Reginald stood alone in the chamber for a while, listening to the faint crackle of the candle's cooling wax. He thought of the long list of customs he had yet to try, whispering secrets into a loaf of bread before sharing it, exchanging shoes for a day to walk in each other's fortune, planting a tree together and naming it after a shared memory. But tonight, he decided, he had found a new tradition, one that was not written in any book, nor heard from any sailor's tale. It was simply this: to make space for another person's truth, however small, in the light of a single flame. When Marjorie reached the bend in the lane, she glanced back at the house. Through the mist, she saw a faint glow from an upstairs window. For reasons she could not explain, she felt certain it would always be there. A small, steady light, waiting for the next confession. And in a town that thrived on peculiar customs, that seemed somehow the most comforting one of all.